Thank you again for coming, Giancarlo.
My pleasure.
I know it was a long trip for you, but I just wanted to talk a little bit about cybersecurity and business intelligence for payments. So
Right.
for those that are here today that don't know a lot about cybersecurity, can you tell us a little bit about what that means?
Sure. Cybersecurity is basically, let's say, the technology to prevent situations within a certain organization. So it's a technique used to protect the organization from cyber attacks. And there are different types of cyber attacks we experience today. These have to be part of what we call a security strategy within the organization. So security strategy has got to do with knowing exactly what kind of measurements are in place to prevent these and understanding the risks behind them, and obviously knowing exactly what systems need to be looked after. Now there's a tendency sometimes to focus on major systems, but leaving other systems unprotected, which could result in obviously a compliance issue. According to Forbes, global security is something that is reaching a market of around 75 billion, and it's growing up to 170 billion. So there's definitely a situation where you need to invest, to manage that.
Thank you for the information on just what cybersecurity is, and in relation to payments and the companies that are here today. What is typically missed when it comes to cybersecurity related to payments?
Well, yeah, there's quite a number of topics you need to really consider. One of the first one is obviously having the basics right. So understanding what cybersecurity is about, understanding what generates a cyber threat, so what type of cyber threats there are, and there has to be a very clear cybersecurity policy in place. Now sometimes it's important to make a difference between compliance and cybersecurity. Now they do work together, but compliance is to do about the control within a certain organization of how the data flows are working and the information is kept. And the cybersecurity is about the security measures, which usually work together. It's important to be aware of the infrastructure because it ages. So there's an aging infrastructure tends to have some, let's say, gaps within it. We speak about also the infrastructure bringing this into the cloud, because it means that you can have a really state-of-the-art technology you can be using, which comes with a recovery plan, because sometimes if something should happen, you always have a disaster recovery scenario in front of you, and you can manage the risk in a better way. Another important part is the integrating the various data flows, meaning that you have a multi ERP integration, which allows you to make sure that there's a single point of contact, so you can always determine where the information is coming from and where is it going to avoid cyber attacks. There's the human factor, which is the weakest link in most cases, but if you do have compliance in place, you can manage it better, and making sure that everybody is educated about security training.
For those companies that are here, we've done surveys and things around fraud and payments and how companies are protecting themselves, and probably only about half of them are doing something about it today. So what can companies that aren't doing anything start protecting themselves? So what do they do first?
Okay, yeah, it's a difficult question to start, but 5 main points. First of all, there are a variety of risks to take into account. So you have to analyze these risks very carefully. And it goes from manual payments, who has the right to open a bank account, for example, processing statements, straight through process. So let's make sure that you have controls in place, how this works. And you should ask yourself, the question is, do you have the right people, the right processes and the right systems in place? And are you aware of the current threats? So you should definitely ask these questions first of all. You should exploit new technologies, because they are there to help you to enhance the payment processes. Keep a very firm grip on fraud, because that's what can happen very quickly. So having those controls in place. Align with international, we call them initiatives and technologies, because it means you are aware of what's happening and how it's changing and how you can prevent things from happening. And ensure compliance. Basically, that's the main 5 points I would recommend.
One of the things I learned this week, or these past few days, just here at AFP, is those that are trying to compromise our systems with cybersecurity, they get better and better at it, and they change their routes. So I learned 2 other ways this week that they're actually threatening different companies. It's through no longer just email, but they're actually posing them on the phone, and they're also coming in through their IM messaging internally, trying to get payments out. So yes, these are all different threats that are coming. So moving on a little bit into business intelligence. We hear about business intelligence or BI with reporting and making sure a company can, report from multiple systems into one to get things reported upon on a quick basis. But what about for payments? What does business intelligence have to do with payments?
Yes, that's something has changed in the payment environment, and I must agree that indeed we see these threats growing every day, and we are aware of them. But it's important to have, I would say, the first point you've got to have is transparency. Transparency has got to do with understanding the risk, so understanding where the information is. It's about to be able to make what we call sound decisions, because if you have the information in the right place, you can make the right decision in case there is a risk. And obviously you need very efficient reporting. Reporting means that everybody can very quickly identify the situation at a very high speed. That's one of the first points. So BI is indeed an enabler, because it gives you the opportunity to report on different type of elements within the organization, goes from different type of payments. So for example, a very critical point is salary payments, for example. So you get to know where these are coming from and who's authorizing them, and knowing where your cash flow, your liquidity is, that kind of information. But what's important is to have a clear visibility and transparency on the cash flows. So meaning be compliant in the payment processes, so having those controls in place, and BI enables you to minimize the risk because you have the transparency there.
Understanding all of those business intelligence around payments and how you can protect yourself, how is globalization impacting payments as well in that regard?
Yeah, first of all, globalization it's what we call a leading concept, because it influences very much the way the business is run today. And there's a very fast-moving approach in the technology we use. Those technology changes continuously, and a company must be, let's say, prepared in three main areas concerning globalization, and has to be aware of these. And the first one is about competition, and that means that it can be related to the products or services out there, and they need to understand the different type of products and services available, and it's in their interest to be competitive in their market if they want to be successful. And the second main point is the exchange of technology. That has to do with, let's say, if you know how to exploit the new opportunities, you can take advantage of the technology available. The customer's expectations are really today are directing the market in which direction it should go, and it's giving us the information about how technology can help them to be more efficient within this very fast-moving globalization. The last point is about knowledge information transfer. I think probably the most important is when information is within the organization is probably the most valuable factor to be aware of, and adopting what we call a central payment solution allows you to identify where that sensible data is. It allows you to understand how to manage the information in a compliant manner, and you are aware of how globalization is influencing actually your decisions to have the right technologies in place. So those are pretty many concepts to take care of, but that's how globalization affects payments today.
Thank you so much for your time, telling us a little more about cybersecurity and payments today. We thank you very much for coming tonight.
Thank you very much.